There is a ghost sitting at the head of your Thanksgiving table, right next to the turkey and the cranberry sauce. We are told a fairy tale about the first winter of the Pilgrims, about how they survived the brutal cold. We are told they learned to grow corn and catch fish, but the history books left out the most important calorie. There is a native root hidden in the soil of North America that actually saved the European settlers from total starvation. It is a vegetable that contains 3 times the protein of the potatoes you are currently mashing with butter and milk. It is a superfood that grows like a weed, fertilizes its own soil, and returns every single year without being replanted. But today, you cannot find it in the grocery store, you cannot find it in the restaurant, and you cannot find it on your plate. We traded a high-protein, soil-building, perennial powerhouse for a weak, starchy immigrant that requires millions of gallons of pesticides. We traded the native engine of American survival for the Irish potato, and in doing so, we forgot our own history. This is the story of the groundnut, the vegetable that kept the Pilgrims alive and then was abandoned by their children. The archive opens on the frozen shores of Plymouth Colony in the desperate winter of 1620. The Pilgrims were dying, their supplies from the Mayflower were gone, and the ground was locked in a bitter frost. They were strangers in a strange land, unprepared for the harsh reality of the New England winter. But as they scavenged the riverbanks and the edges of the woods, they found caches of food buried in the earth. They found strings of tubers, connected like beads on a necklace, hidden by the indigenous people who lived there. The Wampanoag people had been cultivating this plant for thousands of years, treating the landscape as a giant, edible garden. The Pilgrims dug them up, boiled them, and ate them, likely surviving that first winter solely because of this stolen calorie. They called them ground nuts or potato beans, and for a brief moment, it was the most important food in America. But as the colony expanded, they imported the crops they knew from home: wheat, barley, and the white potato. They looked at the native vine with its tangled roots and decided it was too wild, too messy, and too strange. They paved over the food forest to plant row crops, trading a perennial abundance for an annual grind of plowing and tilling. Let me tell you what is actually hidden inside this tuber that makes the white potato look like a nutritional void. The groundnut, or times Apios americana asterisk, is not actually a potato at all. It is a member of the legume family. It is related to peas and beans, which gives it a biological superpower that root vegetables do not possess. The white potato is mostly starch and water. It gives you a quick burst of energy, but it does not build muscle. The groundnut is packed with protein, containing between 15 and 17% protein by dry weight. That is 3 times the protein content of a standard russet potato, making it a complete survival food. You could survive on ground nuts alone and maintain your muscle mass, something that is impossible with regular potatoes. But the nutritional victory goes deeper than just protein. It is also a rich source of calcium and iron. It has a dense, nutty flavor that tastes like a cross between a roasted sweet potato and a turnip. It is the kind of food that sticks to your ribs, the kind of food that fuels a day of hard labor. So here is the question that should bother you every time you look at the produce section of your supermarket. If we have a native vegetable that has more protein than a potato and tastes delicious, why are we not eating it? Why are we spending billions of dollars to grow a European crop that is constantly under attack from beetles and blight? The suppression of the groundnut is a story of the industrial machine versus the natural rhythm of the earth. The modern agricultural system is built on speed, uniformity, and the ability to harvest with massive combines. The white potato is a compliant crop. It grows in neat little hills, and the tubers detach easily from the plant. The groundnut is a rebel. It grows on a long, stringy vine that can reach 20 feet in length. The tubers are connected like a chain, woven into the soil in a complex mat that defies mechanical harvesting. If you drive a tractor through a field of groundnuts, the vines will tangle in the gears and stop the machine. It is a plant that demands human hands or specialized equipment, and the industry does not want to pay for patience. They classified it as a wild weed because it did not fit the geometry of the factory farm. They chose the potato because it was profitable for the machine, not because it was better for the human. But there is a deeper ecological tragedy in this choice that affects the very soil we stand on. The white potato is a heavy feeder, meaning it sucks nutrients out of the soil and demands heavy fertilization. To grow potatoes year after year, you have to dump synthetic nitrogen on the field, which runs off and pollutes the water. The groundnut does the exact opposite. Because it is a legume, it fixes its own nitrogen from the air. It has a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in the soil, pulling inert gas from the atmosphere and turning it into fertilizer. It feeds the soil as it grows, leaving the earth richer than it found it. It is a permaculture dream, a plant that produces food while simultaneously repairing the damage done by industrial farming. If the Irish had been dependent on the groundnut instead of the lumper potato in 1845, history would be different. The groundnut is resistant to the blight that caused the potato famine. It is a survivor of the American wilderness. We traded a resilient, soil-building, high-protein warrior for a weak, disease-prone, starch-filled weakling. But knowledge is a seed that can lie dormant for centuries before it sprouts again in the right mind. While the supermarkets were selling white starch, the groundnut was waiting in the river bottoms and the old fence lines. Henry David Thoreau, the famous naturalist, lived on them during his time at Walden Pond. He wrote about digging them up in the fall, marveling at the abundance that nature provided without any labor. He wondered why the civilized world had ignored such a noble plant in favor of imported crops. He saw the groundnut not just as food, but as a symbol of a lost connection to the American landscape. He saw a future where we would reclaim these native plants, but that future never came until now. The "you cannot" list for the groundnut is what keeps the casual gardener from succeeding, but it protects the dedicated. You cannot plant this and expect a harvest in 90 days like a radish or a lettuce leaf. The groundnut plays the long game. It takes 2 to 3 years for the tubers to reach a harvestable size. You cannot plant it in a manicured garden bed next to your delicate petunias and expect it to behave. It is a vine that wants to climb, to explore, and to take over the territory with its lush green leaves. You cannot eat it raw. Like many legumes, it contains protease inhibitors that can cause stomach upset if not cooked. You must treat it with the respect of a chef, roasting it, boiling it, or frying it to unlock its potential. But the "you can" list is a manifesto of food sovereignty for anyone willing to invest the time. You can plant a single tuber in a damp corner of your yard and ignore it for 5 years. When you come back, you will not find a dead plant. You will find a colony that has multiplied underground. You can harvest the tubers in the dead of winter when the ground is frozen and the grocery store is empty. You can peel the strings of tubers out of the earth like pulling up a buried treasure chest of calories. You can dry them and grind them into a flour that adds a massive protein boost to your bread and pancakes. You can fry them into chips that are crunchier and more flavorful than any potato chip you have ever tasted. The empowerment of the groundnut comes from its perennial nature. It breaks the cycle of annual slavery. With a potato, you have to save seed, replant every spring, hill the soil, and pray the bugs don't get it. With the groundnut, you plant it once, and it becomes a permanent part of your landscape. It comes back every spring with beautiful, orchid-like flowers that smell like violets and attract pollinators. It creates a dense screen of green leaves that can hide a fence or shade a porch. And underneath the beauty, it is silently building a stockpile of protein that you can access whenever you need it. So here is what you do. You stop accepting the weak European potato as the only option for your dinner. You find a source of times Apios americana times tubers from a native plant nursery or an heirloom seed saver. You do not buy them from the grocery store. You have to hunt for them, just like the Pilgrims did. You plant them near a trellis, a fence, or a dead tree, anything that allows the vine to climb towards the sun. You mulch them heavily with leaves and wood chips to keep the soil moist and mimic the forest floor. And then, you do the hardest thing for a modern human to do. You wait. You let the first year pass without a harvest, allowing the plant to establish its energy system. You let the second year pass, watching the vines get thicker and the flowers get more abundant. In the third autumn, after the frost has killed the leaves, You take a pitchfork and gently lift the soil. You will feel the resistance of the root mat, the density of the life that has accumulated under your feet. You pull up a string of tubers the size of golf balls, connected by a tough, fibrous cord. You wash them off, smelling the rich, earthy scent of a plant that belongs to this continent. You slice them, toss them in oil and salt, and roast them until they are golden brown and crispy. You take a bite, and you taste the nuttiness, the density, the power of a real survival food. You realize that you are eating the same meal that saved the people who founded this nation. You realize that the weed in the river bottom is actually a king in disguise. You reclaim the name that the industry forgot. You do not call it a weed. You call it the Pilgrim's potato. You call it the muscle root. You call it the nitrogen fixer. Every person who plants a patch of groundnuts is engaging in an act of biological rebellion against monoculture. Every person who waits 3 years for a harvest is proving that they have the patience to build real wealth. The tuber they ignored because it didn't fit in the machine. The tuber they forgot because it was too wild. The tuber that holds the secret to feeding a hungry world without destroying the soil. Ancient people knew it was the backbone of the winter diet. The modern industry definitely knows it is a logistical nightmare they don't want to solve. Now you know it is a superfood that has been waiting for you to come back home. The groundnut is still here, hiding in the soil, fixing the nitrogen, and holding the history of America in its roots. It can feed you, it can build your muscles, and it can save your soil. If this opened something for you, subscribe, because every share helps preserve the forbidden knowledge of the garden. Let's go deeper into the twist of the science, because there was a moment when this plant almost made it. In the 20th century, researchers at Louisiana State University, led by Dr. William Blackman, saw the potential. They realized that the groundnut could be the answer to global food insecurity because of its high protein. They started a breeding program to domesticate the wild vine, trying to create larger tubers and more compact plants. They created varieties that yielded massive amounts of food, proving that the plant could be improved. But just as they were making breakthroughs, the funding dried up, and the project was largely abandoned. The agricultural industry wasn't interested in a crop that didn't need their fertilizers and pesticides. They weren't interested in a crop that took years to establish, even if it produced more food in the long run. The research is sitting in dusty archives, waiting for a new generation of growers to pick it up. You are that new generation. By planting these tubers in your backyard, you are continuing the work that the scientists were forced to stop. You are becoming a citizen scientist, selecting the best vines, the biggest tubers, and the best flavor. You are part of a decentralized breeding program that can bring this plant back from the brink of obscurity. There is also a medical angle that the old herbalists knew about, and modern science is just confirming. The groundnut contains isoflavones, similar to soy, which have been linked to reduced rates of cancer and heart disease. But unlike soy, which is one of the most genetically modified and pesticide-laden crops on Earth, the groundnut is wild. It has not been tampered with. It has not been sprayed with Roundup. It is pure genetics. It offers the benefits of soy without the baggage of the industrial food system. It is a clean source of plant-based protein that grows in your own backyard without a single drop of chemical input. This is the definition of food security, a crop that you control from the seed to the plate. When you grow potatoes, you are often growing a clone that is susceptible to the same diseases that wiped out the crop in Ireland. When you grow groundnuts, you are growing a diverse, genetically robust population that can handle climate change. It tolerates flooding. It tolerates wet soil that would rot a regular potato in days. As our weather gets wilder and our storms get wetter, we need crops that like to swim. The groundnut is an aquatic warrior, thriving in the conditions that are destroying conventional agriculture. It is the crop of the future, disguised as the crop of the past. So look at your landscape with new eyes. Where do you have a wet spot where nothing grows? Where do you have a fence that looks ugly and bare? Where do you have soil that is dead and needs to be brought back to life? The groundnut is the answer to all these problems. It is the permaculture solution that feeds you while it works. Do not let the long wait time discourage you. Let it inspire you. We live in a world of instant gratification, and look where it has gotten us. Cheap food, sick bodies, and dead soil. The groundnut demands an investment of time, but it pays dividends for a lifetime. Plant it for yourself, plant it for your children, and plant it for the soil that sustains you. The lost American supertuber is ready to be found again. It is time to invite the ghost back to the Thanksgiving table and give it the seat of honor. Dig deep, plant strong, and eat like a survivor. The revolution begins in the root cellar.